What if I told you that a single penny, the smallest denomination in your pocket, could be worth more than your car, your vacation, even your house in some cases? That something so ordinary, so overlooked, could quietly hold the power to transform a life? It sounds impossible. But for collectors and coin hunters in the know, the 2013 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is a treasure that has stunned the numismatic world, and it's worth millions. Yes, millions. Most people think pennies are worthless. They drop them into jars, pay for a soda, or forget them in a drawer. But every so often, the U.S. Mint releases a coin that defies that assumption. A coin that carries a secret, a flaw, an error, a story that the world didn't know it needed, until someone realized just how rare it truly was. And the 2013 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is that coin. At first glance, it looks like every other penny. Copper-colored, small, unassuming, featuring the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln. But there's something different about it. Something extraordinary. And that difference has made collectors and investors go into a frenzy. The 2013 penny should have a mint mark. Normally, you would see a small D for Denver or P for Philadelphia stamped right below the date. But the no-mint mark variety, it doesn't. It's as if it was never touched by a minting press in either location. How could that happen? How could a coin produced by one of the most sophisticated mints in the world escape without a mark? Experts believe that these pennies slipped through production due to a rare error during the die-making process. A penny without a mint mark should not exist in circulation, and yet here they are, quietly appearing in change, hiding in drawers, or sitting unnoticed in collections. Each coin is a whisper from history, a mistake that became priceless, and this is where it gets even more shocking. While a normal 2013 penny is worth exactly what you paid for it, a no-mint mark variety can fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars in the market. Some reports suggest that in perfect condition, these pennies have sold for astronomical amounts. The very top examples, in flawless grading, have been valued as high as $844,000. Nearly $1 million for a coin that could be sitting right under your couch cushions. Imagine the excitement, the disbelief, the sheer thrill of realizing that the change you toss in a jar might just be a key to unimaginable wealth. But the story doesn't stop there. The 2013 no-mint mark Lincoln cent isn't just rare, it's a modern legend. Unlike old, centuries-old coins, this is a coin you could realistically find today. That makes the possibility of discovery almost tangible. And it's exactly that thought that keeps collectors glued to coin shows, eBay auctions, and even their own pockets. Think about it. What would you do if you found one? Would you hold it, wait for it to appreciate, and become part of a secret circle of collectors who understand its rarity? Or would you sell it immediately, cashing in on a single moment that could change your life forever? The truth is, people have done both. And some have turned these tiny copper discs into fortunes, forever altering the way they see the coins around them. The allure of the 2013 no-mint mark penny lies not just in its potential value, but in the story it tells. This coin is proof that mistakes can become miracles, that rarity can arise from imperfection, and that hidden treasures can exist in the most ordinary places. Every scratch, every gleam, every detail of that penny becomes a chapter in a story that collectors and enthusiasts will chase for decades. And here's where the suspense truly builds. Despite its fame, the exact number of these pennies in circulation remains uncertain. Estimates suggest there could be only a handful of mint-condition examples, making each coin almost impossibly rare. That means even if you check every drawer, every pocket, every jar of pennies you've ever had, you could be holding the very thing that collectors would pay hundreds of thousands for without even realizing it. Isn't that incredible? The next life-changing find could literally be in your hand right now. Collectors describe finding one of these pennies as a moment frozen in disbelief. The thrill isn't just about money. It's about discovery, about holding history in the palm of your hand, about being one of the few in the world to possess something so elusive. And the market proves it. Auctions have seen these coins fetch staggering sums, sometimes doubling or tripling in value within a few years. But there's a warning embedded in every story of these pennies. Condition is everything. A slight scratch, a worn edge, or even a fingerprint can reduce a coin's value exponentially. That's why professional grading has become essential. When these coins are certified as gem mint by trusted authorities, their worth skyrockets. And when collectors see a certified no-mint mark penny, the race begins, because everyone knows the next sale could be historic. Imagine standing at that auction, the gavel poised, the tension electric, and suddenly realizing the penny in your hand is worth more than the life you've been living. That's the kind of suspense, the kind of thrill, that makes the 2013 no-mint mark Lincoln cent not just a coin, but a legend. And here's the most inspiring part. You don't need to be a millionaire or a professional collector to stumble upon one. It could be in a roll of pennies from the bank, a forgotten jar in your garage, or a childhood collection that hasn't been touched in decades. The possibility exists, the opportunity is real, and the rewards, if you're lucky, are unimaginable. So the next time you reach for a penny, remember this: not all coins are created equal. Some hide secrets, some carry stories, and some can change your life forever. The 2013 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is proof that fortune often comes disguised as the most ordinary object. That a small, overlooked piece of metal can carry a story, a history, and a value so staggering that it defies belief. The question isn't whether these coins exist. They do. The question is, will you recognize it when you see it? Will you be the one to hold the coin that could sell for hundreds of thousands, or even close to $1 million? Will you be the next person to turn ordinary copper into a fortune? Because every penny tells a story, and some stories are worth more than gold. The 2013 no-mint mark Lincoln cent is one of them. And if you're paying attention, if you're ready to hunt, and if you're willing to explore every jar, every drawer, every forgotten roll of coins, it could be waiting for you. The treasure is out there. The secret is real. And the next person to hold it could be you. They sit forgotten in jars, buried in couch cushions, dropped into tip trays, or tossed into the bottom of a car cup holder. But what if one of those pennies, the exact same coin millions of Americans ignore every day, could secretly be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even more? Imagine paying for a cup of coffee with a penny, only to discover later that the exact same coin could have sold for as much as $844,000 in pristine condition. It sounds unbelievable, but collectors across the United States know a strange truth about modern coins. Sometimes the smallest, most ordinary-looking pieces of pocket change hide the biggest surprises. And one of the most intriguing examples is the 1998 D Lincoln cent. At first glance, it looks completely normal. Copper color. Lincoln's familiar profile. The date 1998. And a tiny D mint mark, meaning it was struck at the Denver Mint. Nothing special, right? That's exactly what makes it dangerous to ignore. Because hidden within certain 1998 D pennies is a subtle mistake, a microscopic detail that can transform a 1-cent coin into a collector's dream. And the shocking part? Millions of these coins were released directly into circulation. That means they travel through banks, grocery stores, gas stations, vending machines, and pocket change all across America. Some still are. So the real question becomes, how many people unknowingly spent a coin worth thousands, or even hundreds of thousands, of dollars? To understand why the 1998 D penny has captured the attention of collectors, we have to go back to the late 1990s. The U.S. Mint was producing billions of Lincoln cents every year. Demand for small change was enormous, and the Denver Mint was working at full speed. But when mints operate at that level of production, something interesting sometimes happens. Tiny imperfections sneak through. Most of them are meaningless, but every once in a while, a mistake slips past quality control. And when that happens, collectors start paying attention. Very close attention. Point one of the most talked about discoveries connected to the 1998 D cent is known among experts as the wide AM reverse variety. At first, this detail is almost impossible to notice. You could stare at the coin for years and never realize anything unusual is hiding there. But if you flip the coin over and look closely at the word America, you might see something that wasn't supposed to happen. On most Lincoln cents from 1998 struck for circulation, the letters A and M in America are supposed to be very close together, nearly touching, but on certain rare pieces, there's a noticeable gap between them. A wide AM. This tiny spacing difference may sound insignificant, but in the world of coin collecting, microscopic details can mean everything. Because that spacing wasn't supposed to appear on regular 1998 coins. It belonged to a different die design used for proof coins. Special collector versions struck at the San Francisco Mint. Somehow, one of those proof-style dies ended up being used to strike regular circulation pennies. Think about that for a moment. A tool designed for high-end collector coins accidentally used in everyday production. The result? A rare hybrid variety that slipped into circulation unnoticed. And once collectors realized what had happened, the hunt began. Suddenly, people were digging through bank rolls, searching old penny jars, checking every 1998 coin they could find. Because if the spacing between the A and the M looked just right, they might be holding something special. In lower circulated condition, a 1998 wide AM penny might sell for hundreds of dollars. Already an incredible return for a 1-cent coin. But in pristine, high-grade condition, the numbers start climbing dramatically. Thousands, tens of thousands, and under the right circumstances, even more. But here's where the story takes another twist. Because spacing between two letters isn't the only thing collectors watch for. The condition of the coin can change everything. A penny that circulated for years, scratched, worn, and dulled by time, will never command the same price as a coin that somehow escaped circulation untouched. In the coin world, these pristine survivors are graded on a scale known as mint state, often abbreviated as MS-60, MS-63, MS-65, each step representing increasingly perfect preservation. And at the very top of that scale, coins can reach grades like MS-67 or MS-68. Coins at that level are extraordinarily rare, especially for modern pennies that were meant to be spent immediately. Finding one is like discovering a time capsule, and when an ultra-rare variety meets ultra-high condition, the market can explode. Collectors compete fiercely, auctions become battlegrounds, prices skyrocket. Stories circulate of rare Lincoln cents reaching staggering numbers, 6 figures, sometimes more. The idea that a simple penny could approach values like $844,000 sounds almost impossible. But the rare coin market has a long history of surprising people. In fact, some of the most valuable coins ever sold were originally considered pocket change. Take the famous 1943 bronze cent, once worth over $1 million, or the 1969's double die cent that shocked collectors when its dramatic doubling was discovered. History has proven something again and again. Rare pennies can become legends. And every legend starts with someone noticing something unusual. A strange letter. A in odd spacing. A tiny doubling in the design. Just one detail. That's all it takes. Which brings us back to the 1998 D penny. Because the wide AM variety isn't the only thing collectors examine. Experts also inspect the coin for die doubling, die cracks, and other unusual strike characteristics. Some coins show faint doubling around the lettering. Others reveal subtle design shifts created by worn or damaged dies. Each variation adds another layer of intrigue, and another reason collectors keep searching. Think about the scale of the opportunity. The U.S. Mint produced billions of pennies in 1998. Billions. That means somewhere out there, in forgotten jars, inherited collections, or loose change sitting in dresser drawers, these coins may still exist, waiting, unnoticed. Imagine opening an old jar of pennies tonight. You start flipping through them one by one. Most are ordinary, nothing special. Then suddenly, you see a small D mint mark. Your curiosity kicks in. You flip the coin over. Your heart speeds up as you examine the word America. Are the letters touching, or is there a gap? That tiny space could mean the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and one worth a life-changing amount of money. Sounds dramatic, but stories like that are exactly why people fall in love with coin collecting. Because treasure hunting usually requires maps, metal detectors, and remote locations. But coin hunting? It happens at the kitchen table, with a magnifying glass and a pile of change. Every coin becomes a mystery. Every date, every mint mark, every design detail, another clue, and every once in a while, someone finds something extraordinary. That's the magic behind coins. Like the 1998 Lincoln cent, they remind us that value isn't always obvious. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. In something so small, most people never look twice. So before you dismiss that jar of pennies sitting in your house, before you hand a handful of change to a cashier, take a moment, look closely, check the dates, examine the mint marks, and if you find a 1998 penny with a D mint mark, flip it over. Study the word America, because the letters A and M might be closer together than they should be, or they might be slightly farther apart. That tiny difference could turn an ordinary coin into something collectors desperately want, something rare, something valuable, maybe even something legendary. And here's the most exciting part. The next great discovery doesn't have to come from a professional coin dealer. It doesn't have to come from a museum collection. It could come from anyone, from someone exactly like you, someone willing to slow down, pay attention, and check the coins already in their pocket, because somewhere out there tonight, another rare penny is waiting to be noticed, and the person who finds it might just be holding the most valuable 1-cent coin they've ever seen. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a penny, and realizing it could be worth more than a house. Not a rare gold coin, not a century-old treasure buried in a vault, just a small copper cent, the kind millions of Americans overlook every single day. But in the world of coin collecting, one particular penny has sparked curiosity, controversy, and incredible excitement for decades. The 1970 Lincoln cent with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. A date that seems far too modern to matter. And yet, hidden within certain 1970 cents are subtle details, rare variations, and mysterious production quirks that have turned everyday pocket change into some of the most talked about coins among collectors. Some examples have shocked the market with astonishing prices. Others hide tiny features that most people would never notice. And that raises an irresistible question. What if one of those pennies is sitting in your change jar right now? Because the story of the 1970 Lincoln cent isn't just about a coin. It's about the moment someone realizes that a single overlooked detail can transform a 1-cent piece into a collector's prize. To understand why this penny has captivated collectors, we need to step back to the year 1970. America was in the middle of dramatic change. The Vietnam War dominated headlines. The space race was still pushing boundaries. And at the Philadelphia Mint, billions of Lincoln cents were being struck for circulation. Most of those pennies were completely ordinary. But something unusual was happening on the production floor. Subtle differences in dies, tiny alignment shifts, minute variations in lettering and date styles, all began appearing on coins released into circulation. To the average person, these pennies looked identical. But to trained collectors, They were anything but. One of the first things that draws attention is the missing mint mark. Before 1980, Philadelphia pennies often carried no mint mark at all. That means many 1970 cents without a mint mark came directly from the Philadelphia Mint. At first, that doesn't sound special. After all, hundreds of millions were made. But here's where things get interesting. Within those massive mintages, collectors began noticing distinct varieties, small differences in the date, lettering, and die characteristics that separated common coins from truly collectible ones. And sometimes, those differences were dramatic. Take a close look at the date on certain 1970 cents. On some coins, the numbers appear sharp and evenly spaced. On others, the date style looks noticeably different. Thicker lines, slightly altered shapes, and subtle spacing changes that signal something unusual happened during the die preparation process. For most people, it's invisible, but for collectors, it's the kind of detail that can send hearts racing. Because when rare die variations slip into circulation, they create something incredibly valuable in the coin world. Scarcity. And scarcity is where the story takes another twist. Over the decades, collectors began discovering unusual doubling effects on some 1970 Lincoln cents. Letters that appear slightly duplicated, edges of numbers that seem shadowed, design elements that look like they were stamped twice. This phenomenon, known as a double die, can happen when a coin die receives multiple impressions during its creation. The result? Every coin struck from that die carries the same dramatic doubling. And when collectors discover these varieties, the value can skyrocket. But the real intrigue surrounding the 1970 Lincoln cent comes from condition. Because even if a coin isn't a rare double die, a pristine example can still command remarkable attention. Think about how pennies usually live their lives. They're dropped on sidewalks, tossed into jars, scratched, dented, and worn down by decades of use. But every once in a while, a coin survives untouched. Brilliant, sharp, nearly flawless. In the coin world, that kind of preservation is incredibly rare. Professional grading services evaluate coins on a strict scale from 1 to 70. A coin graded near the very top, especially one from circulation, can be astonishingly scarce. And when collectors compete for the finest known examples, prices can climb rapidly. Some rare Lincoln cents across different years and varieties have reached six-figure auction results, stunning people who once thought pennies were worthless. Stories circulate through the collecting community about extraordinary sales, record-breaking auctions, and coins that shock even seasoned experts. One widely discussed claim involves top-tier examples approaching values in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with figures as high as $844,000 sometimes cited in collector conversations surrounding elite Lincoln cent rarities. Whether those numbers represent specific varieties, extraordinary conditions, or broader Lincoln cent records, one thing becomes clear: collectors are willing to pay staggering amounts for the right coin. And that leads to a thrilling possibility. What if a valuable variety is still out there, hidden in circulation, waiting? Think about how many 1970 pennies still exist today. They've been sitting in drawers for decades, mixed into piggy banks, forgotten in jars on kitchen counters. Most people never examine them closely, but collectors know better. They look for details like unusual doubling in the lettering of Liberty, odd spacing in the date, distinctive shapes in the numbers of 1970. Sharp, untouched surfaces with full mint luster, and sometimes they find something incredible. A coin that spent 50 years unnoticed suddenly becomes the centerpiece of a collection. A penny once worth 1 cent becomes worth hundreds or thousands. That transformation is what fuels the passion of coin hunting, because every collector understands a simple truth: rare coins don't always come from treasure chests. Sometimes they come from pocket change. And the 1970 Lincoln cent has become one of those coins people love to search for, not because every example is valuable, but because the right one might be. Picture the moment. You're sorting through a handful of old pennies. Most are dull brown, worn smooth by decades of circulation. Then one catches the light. Bright, sharp. The details look unusually crisp. You flip it over. Check the date. And oh, mint mark. Suddenly, curiosity kicks in. Is the lettering doubled? Does the date look different? Could this be one of the collectible varieties? That moment, the possibility of discovery, is what keeps collectors searching year after year. Because history has proven something remarkable. Some of the most valuable coins ever discovered were found by ordinary people doing exactly that, checking their change, examining old jars, looking closely at coins everyone else ignored. And that's why the 1970 Lincoln set continues to fascinate collectors today. It represents the thrill of possibility. The idea that a simple penny could hide an overlooked detail, a rare die variety, or a pristine condition that collectors are desperate to own. The next time you see a penny dated 1970, don't dismiss it. Turn it over. Study the date. Look at the letters. Ask yourself a simple question. What if this one is different? Because somewhere out there, a rare coin is still waiting to be discovered. And the person who finds it might not be a professional numismatist, or a seasoned collector, or a museum curator. It might be someone exactly like you. Someone who decided to take a closer look at a penny, and realized it was worth far more than 1 cent. Small, copper-colored, usually ignored, tossed into jars, lost in couch cushions, or handed back as change without a second thought. But what if one of those ordinary pennies could secretly be worth a life-changing amount of money? What if a coin that looks almost identical to millions of others could turn out to be a rare mint-era collectors desperately want? And what if that coin is sitting right now, in your pocket? Because there's one coin that has sparked curiosity, rumors, and serious collector attention for decades. The 1979 Lincoln set with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks completely normal. But the deeper you look, the more interesting the story becomes. And for people who dream about discovering hidden treasure in everyday change, this coin has become something of a legend. Let's rewind for a moment. The year is 1979. Gas prices are rising. The Sony Walkman is changing the way people listen to music. And the U.S. Mint is producing billions of Lincoln pennies to keep up with the economy. These coins were struck at several facilities. San Francisco used an S mint mark, Denver used a D, and Philadelphia? For most of the 20th century, Philadelphia coins carried no mint mark at all. So, when you find a 1979 Lincoln set without a mint mark, it usually means it was produced in Philadelphia. In fact, billions of them were. Which raises a question. If they made billions, why do collectors still talk about them? Here's where things get interesting. Because in the world of coin collecting, rarity isn't always about the date. Sometimes it's about mistakes. And the U.S. Mint, despite its precision, has made plenty of them over the years. Doubled dies. Off-center strikes, clipped planchets, wrong metal compositions. These tiny production errors can transform an ordinary coin into something extraordinary. And the 1979 Lincoln set has been discovered with several fascinating varieties. Collectors have reported examples with noticeable doubling in the lettering, especially around Liberty and the date. Others show dramatic die cracks running across Lincoln's portrait. Some even reveal subtle striking anomalies that only appear under magnifying glass tilted left. To the average person, they look like minor imperfections. To a trained collector, they can mean serious money. Now here's the twist that fuels the excitement. Condition. In coin collecting, condition can be everything. A penny that spent decades circulating through vending machines and cash registers might be worth exactly 1 cent, but the same coin preserved in pristine, untouched condition could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That difference is measured using a grading scale that ranges from poor all the way to mint state. The highest grades, MS 67, MS-68, and beyond, are extraordinarily difficult to find. Why? Because pennies are among the most heavily circulated coins in America. They're dropped, scratched, stacked, and handled constantly. So finding one from 1979 that somehow avoided all of that damage is like finding a time capsule, and collectors will pay for it. Auction records show that exceptionally high-grade Lincoln cents from this era can sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, especially when they're certified by professional grading services. But the internet has taken the story even further. You may have seen headlines claiming that a 1979 penny without a mint mark is worth hundreds of thousands, or even millions. Stories circulate about coins selling for astronomical prices. Numbers like $844,000 get thrown around online. Collision. So what's the truth? Here's the reality. Most 1979 pennies without a mint mark are completely normal Philadelphia issues. They're common, and in circulated condition, they're usually worth exactly what you'd expect. 1 cent, but that doesn't mean the hunt is pointless. Far from it, because hidden among those billions of coins are exceptions. High-grade survivors, striking errors, unusual varieties, coins that slipped past quality control decades ago and ended up in everyday change. And when collectors discover them today, the results can be surprising. A dramatic double die. A major off-center strike. A coin struck on the wrong metal planchet. Those kinds of errors can command serious attention at auctions. Sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands, and occasionally far more if the error is spectacular. That's why experienced collectors never dismiss a coin based only on its date. They look closer. They rotate it under light. They check the lettering. They examine the rim, because the smallest detail can completely change the story. Think about it. Every day in America, millions of people handle pennies. They pour them into jars. They roll them for the bank. They spin them without looking twice. But hidden in that ocean of copper could be something rare, something overlooked, something valuable. And history has proven this more than once. A famous example is the 1943 bronze Lincoln cent. That coin was never supposed to exist, yet a few were accidentally struck, and today they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Another example is the 1955 double die penny. At first glance, it's just another Lincoln cent, but the dramatic doubling in the date and lettering turned it into one of the most famous era coins ever discovered. Some have sold for tens of thousands, all because someone noticed something unusual. Which brings us back to that humble 1979 penny. Imagine pulling one from a jar tonight. You flip it over. You notice there's no mint mark. At first, it seems ordinary. But then you look closer. Is the lettering perfectly sharp? Is Lincoln's portrait unusually crisp? Does anything look doubled? Is the coin perfectly centered? Is the surface unusually clean for a coin more than 40 years old? Those are the questions collectors ask. Because sometimes the difference between a penny and a valuable collectible is measured in tiny details. And those details are often hiding in plain sight. That's why coin hunters across the country still search through rolls of pennies from the bank. They check pocket change. They dig through inherited coin jars. Not because every coin is valuable, but because every now and then one is. And the thrill of that possibility keeps the hunt alive. So the next time someone hands you a penny and change, pause for a second. Look at the date. Check for the mint mark. Or the absence of one. Tilt the coin under the light. Examine the lettering. You might see nothing unusual at all. But then again, you might notice something strange. Something collectors are searching for. Because treasure doesn't always come in gold bars or pirate chests. Sometimes it comes disguised as the smallest coin in your pocket. A penny most people ignore. A penny minted more than 4 decades ago. A penny that might be worth far more than anyone around you realizes. And the only way to know.
It's the coin that ends up in couch cushions, car cup holders, or forgotten in the bottom of a jar on the kitchen counter. One said practically invisible, but what if one of those pennies, the kind you pass every single day, could be worth a small fortune, not a few dollars. Not even a few thousand. We're talking about a coin that collectors have chased for decades. A humble Lincoln cent from 1977 that, under the right circumstances, can trigger a frenzy among serious buyers, and in the rarest conditions, coins from this era of the Lincoln cent series have reached astonishing prices in the collector market, sometimes climbing into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, yes. For a penny, which raises a dangerous question: what if one of them is hiding in your pocket right now? The year was 1977. America was moving forward after a turbulent decade. Gas was cheap. Disco was everywhere. And the United States Mint was quietly producing billions of Lincoln cents, those familiar copper coins with Abraham Lincoln's portrait staring calmly into history. Most of them were struck in Philadelphia, and that's where things get interesting, because in 1977, pennies struck in Philadelphia didn't carry a mint mark. NOD. No S. Just the date, and Lincoln. At first glance, that might not sound special. In fact, it was completely normal for the time. Philadelphia cents traditionally had no mint mark until the 1980s, but here's where the story begins to twist. When billions of coins are produced, mistakes happen, tiny mistakes, invisible mistakes, the kind of mistakes that can transform a 1-cent coin into something collectors will fight over, and the 1977 Lincoln cent has become one of those coins that serious collectors examine very carefully, because hidden among the mountains of ordinary pennies, a few extraordinary ones slipped through. Coins with striking errors, coins with unusual die characteristics, coins with conditions so pristine they look like they were minted yesterday, and those are the coins that make headlines. Here's the reality most people don't realize: condition can change everything. A typical circulated 1977 penny is still worth 1 cent, maybe 2. But a 1977 Lincoln cent in near perfect condition, what collectors call mint state, is a completely different story. Coins graded MS67 red, meaning they retain their original copper color with almost no flaws, can command serious money from collectors trying to complete elite registry sets. Why? Because perfection is rare. Think about it, billions were made. But how many survived nearly 50 years without scratches, fingerprints, bag marks, or fading? Almost none, and that scarcity turns ordinary coins into coveted collectibles. But condition alone isn't the whole story. The real excitement comes from errors. Mint errors are the accidental signatures of the minting process, moments where machinery, pressure, or alignment didn't behave exactly as expected. And collectors love them. Imagine a penny where the design is struck slightly off-center. Lincoln's portrait drifting toward the edge of the coin, the date pulled dangerously close to the rim. That's called an off-center strike. To most people it might look damaged. To collectors, it's a treasure. Depending on how dramatic the shift is, off-center Lincoln cents from the 1970s have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Then there are die cracks. These happen when the metal dies used to stamp coins begin to fracture after striking millions of pieces, instead of producing perfectly smooth designs. The die leaves raised lines across the coin. Sometimes they look like lightning bolts running across Lincoln's coat or stretching through the lettering. Most are minor, but occasionally, a dramatic die crack can make a coin unique enough to attract serious attention. And then there's the category collectors hunt for: most aggressively doubled dies. This is when the coin's design appears doubled, letters slightly overlapping, numbers appearing thick or shadowed. It happens during the creation of the die itself, and once that flawed die starts striking coins, every coin it produces carries the same telltale doubling. If you've ever heard of the legendary 1955 doubled die Lincoln cent, you already know how powerful that effect can be. Some of those coins have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's what fuels the dream, because every generation of coins has its surprises. Sometimes the discovery happens decades later, when collectors begin noticing unusual details under magnification. A thicker date, unusual spacing in the lettering. A subtle doubling no one recognized before, and suddenly, a coin everyone thought was ordinary becomes something far more interesting. But there's another twist that keeps collectors obsessed with the 1977 cent. It's not just about errors. It's about survival. Copper coins from the 1970s were used heavily in circulation. They rattled through vending machines, cash registers, piggy banks, and parking meters. They scratched. They oxidized. They darkened. Perfect examples simply didn't last. So when a truly pristine 1977 Lincoln cent appears, brilliant red, flawless surfaces, razor-sharp details, it becomes a prize. Elite collectors compete for the finest examples known, and that's where prices can jump dramatically, sometimes thousands of dollars for a single penny that looks as if it just left the mint press. Now here's where the internet has poured gasoline on the story. You may have seen headlines claiming a 1977 no mint mark penny worth $844,000. Stories like that spread fast, but the truth behind those claims is more complicated. While certain rare Lincoln cents from other years have indeed reached staggering prices, especially legendary varieties like the 1943 bronze cent or the 1969 S double die, the typical 1977 cent doesn't reach those levels. At least, not yet. But here's the thing about coin collecting: markets change. Discoveries happen, and sometimes the coin everyone ignored for decades suddenly becomes the one collectors can't stop talking about. All it takes is one newly identified variety, one spectacular error, one perfect specimen that pushes the boundaries of condition, and suddenly the spotlight shifts. Remember this: many of the most famous coins in American history weren't recognized immediately, they were discovered years later, by ordinary people. People who simply looked closer. A cashier noticing an odd date. A collector spotting strange lettering under a magnifying glass. A family sorting through an old jar of coins, which leads to the question that makes collectors lean forward: what should you be looking for? Start with the date, 1977. Look for a penny with no mint mark beneath the year that indicates it was struck in Philadelphia. Then examine the condition. Is the coin still bright copper red? Are Lincoln's cheek and jaw free from scratches? Are the letters crisp and sharp? Next, check the alignment of the design. Is the strike perfectly centered, or does something feel slightly off? Look closely at the numbers in the date and the letters in Liberty and In God We Trust. Do you see any signs of doubling, any unusual thickness, any strange shadows? Even tiny details can matter, and if something looks different, don't ignore it. Because coin collecting history is filled with moments where someone nearly overlooked something extraordinary. A penny tossed into a drawer. A coin mistaken for damage. A tiny anomaly that turned out to be incredibly rare. That's the thrill of the hunt. It's the reason millions of Americans still check their change, because every coin carries a story, and once in a while, that story turns into a life-changing discovery. So tonight, when you empty your pockets or pass by that jar of loose change on the counter, take a second look, hold the pennies up to the light, check the dates, study the details. Most of them will be ordinary, but one might not be, and somewhere out there, a rare coin is still waiting to be noticed. It might be hiding in a coin roll from the bank. It might be sitting quietly in a piggy bank that hasn't been opened in 20 years. Or it might be resting right now in the palm of your hand. A single cent small copper. Easy to ignore, but sometimes worth far more than anyone ever expected. And the next incredible discovery, it could belong to the person who decides to look just a little closer. Magnifying glass tilted left. In 1976, millions of Americans carried a small copper coin in their pockets without giving it a second thought. It bought a piece of candy, maybe a newspaper, maybe nothing at all. But what if one of those pennies, the humble 1976 Lincoln cent, could be worth more than a luxury mansion? What if the coin sitting in an old jar, a dresser drawer, or a forgotten piggy bank could be valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars? Even more shocking, in pristine condition. Some experts estimate that the most extraordinary examples and rare error varieties tied to this year could reach values approaching the $1 million mark, and one recorded market sale connected to elite condition Lincoln cents has climbed as high as $844,000 for a single penny, the kind most people still toss into a tip jar. So the question is simple and unsettling: what if you've already held one? To understand why this ordinary looking coin has sparked such excitement among collectors, we need to travel back to 1976. America was celebrating its bicentennial, 200 years of independence. The nation was in a mood of pride and reflection. Special coins were being minted to commemorate the moment. Quarters, half dollars, and dollars all carried special bicentennial designs, but the penny stayed the same: Abraham Lincoln on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back. A design Americans had seen for decades, and nothing special. Or so it seemed that year. The Denver Mint struck billions of Lincoln cents, each marked with a small D mint mark beneath the date. Most were routine coins, mass-produced. Ordinary, but hidden among those billions, were mistakes, tiny mechanical accidents, die imperfections, subtle misalignments, errors that most people would never notice. And yet those mistakes are exactly what collectors hunt for, because in the world of coin collecting, perfection is valuable, but rare imperfection can be priceless. Imagine this: a mint worker installs a die that has a slight doubling effect. The machine begins striking coins, one after another, thousands of them. At first glance, nothing seems wrong, but look closely. Under magnification, the letters appear doubled, the numbers shimmer with a shadow-like echo. This phenomenon is known as a double die error, and when it occurs on certain Lincoln cents, collectors go into a frenzy. And now ask yourself something. How many people in 1976 carefully examined their pocket change with a magnifying glass? Almost none, which means countless error coins. quietly slipped into circulation. They traveled through grocery stores, gas stations, laundromats, vending machines, passing from hand to hand year after year, decade after decade, until one day, someone finally noticed, and that's when things started getting interesting, because some collectors began reporting unusual features on certain 1976 Lincoln cents, subtle doubling in the date, strange distortions in the lettering, mint marks that appeared slightly misaligned or unusually bold, and occasionally, dramatic errors like off-center strikes, where part of the coin's design is missing entirely. To an average person, that might look like damage. To a collector, it can look like a treasure map. Here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. Condition: most pennies live hard lives. They bounce around in pockets, scrape against keys, grind through cash registers. By the time collectors see them decades later, they're worn nearly smooth, but every once in a while, something extraordinary happens. A roll of coins gets tucked away in a drawer. A collector saves a few fresh examples straight from the bank. A forgotten jar sits untouched for 40 years. Inside those time capsules, coins remain almost exactly as they left the mint. In the collecting world, these are called mint state coins, and the difference between an average penny and a flawless one can be staggering. Picture two identical 1976 pennies. Point one is worn and dull, value maybe a few cents, the other is blazing red, with sharp details and flawless surfaces. Graded at the highest levels by professional grading services, that coin can command thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, and when rare mint errors combine with near-perfect condition, prices can skyrocket. Some elite Lincoln cents across the series have reached astonishing market levels, including sales pushing into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. One legendary transaction tied to rare high grade Lincoln cents has been reported around $844,000. That's not pocket change. That's life-changing money, all from a coin most people wouldn't bend down to pick up. And here's the part that keeps collectors awake at night. No one knows how many valuable 1976 error cents are still out there. Think about that, billions were minted, billions were spent, but only a fraction have ever been examined closely, which raises a chilling possibility: the coin worth a fortune might already exist, quietly sitting in someone's change jar, maybe even yours. So what should you be looking for? First, check the date and mint mark. You're searching for 1976 with a small d beneath it. Next, look closely at the lettering, Liberty, In God We Trust, and the numbers in the date. Do any letters appear doubled? Do the edges look slightly split or shadowed? That could signal a doubled die. Then examine the coin's alignment. Is the design perfectly centered, or does part of the image seem cut off? An off-center strike can transform an ordinary penny into a collector's prize. And don't forget the surface. Original bright red copper color is highly prized. The more vibrant and untouched the coin appears, the higher its potential grade. But here's the twist: sometimes the most valuable coins look almost normal. The differences can be microscopic, which is why serious collectors rely on professional grading companies like PCGS and NGC to authenticate and evaluate coins. A certified grade can mean the difference between a coin worth a few dollars and one worth a small fortune. Now imagine this scenario. You're cleaning out an old drawer, you find a dusty jar filled with pennies from decades ago. At first, you almost throw them into a coin machine, but then something stops you: curiosity. You pour them out on the table. One by one, you check the dates: 1969, 1981, 1974, then suddenly, you see at 1976, with a tiny d. Your heart skips. Could this be one of the rare ones? Could it carry an error? Could it be in unusually good condition? This is the moment that fuels the dreams of collectors across America, because history has proven something remarkable. Fortunes have been discovered in the most ordinary places. In coffee cans. In inherited collections. In forgotten bankrolls. In loose change. And every year, new discoveries are still being made. That means the hunt is far from over. Right now, somewhere in the United States, a rare coin is waiting to be noticed. It might be hiding in a jar on a kitchen counter. In a coin album passed down through generations. Or buried in a pile of change at the bottom of a purse, and the person who discovers it could walk away with a story that sounds almost unbelievable. A penny worth thousands, maybe more. So tonight, before you ignore that pile of loose change, before you dump those pennies into a machine, take a closer look. Study the dates, examine the mint marks, search for the unexpected, because the next time someone says a penny isn't worth anything, you'll know a secret most people don't. Sometimes, a single cent can change everything. Somewhere in America tonight, a small copper coin is sitting in a jar, in a dresser drawer, maybe even in your pocket. It looks ordinary, worn, forgotten. The kind of coin people toss into a tip jar without a second thought. But what if that coin wasn't ordinary at all? What if one tiny detail, so small most people never notice it, could transform a single penny into something worth thousands, tens of thousands, Or, according to whispers in the rare coin world, even life-changing money, because hidden among millions of everyday coins is one that has collectors searching, dealers watching, and everyday Americans digging through their change, the 1972 Lincoln cent with no mint mark. At first glance, it seems completely normal. After all, pennies from Philadelphia in 1972 were struck without a mint mark. Millions upon millions were produced. Nothing rare about that, right? That's what most people believe, and that belief is exactly why the truly valuable ones keep slipping through people's fingers, because some of those 1972 pennies hide a secret so subtle, so easy to overlook, that even experienced collectors sometimes miss it. A mistake. A minting error. A flaw in the very process used to strike America's coinage. And that mistake turned an ordinary penny into one of the most fascinating treasure hunts in modern coin collecting. Let's rewind for a moment. It's 1972. The United States Mint is producing Lincoln cents by the billions. Machines stamp coin after coin, hour after hour. Steel dies slam down with enormous pressure, imprinting Abraham Lincoln's portrait and the familiar words, "Liberty. In God we trust." 1 cent, everything is supposed to be perfect, but perfection is rare in a system producing billions of coins, and sometimes, something goes wrong. In the case of certain 1972 pennies from Philadelphia, those without a mint mark, the problem started before the coin was even struck. It started with the die. A working die is created from a master hub. The design is pressed into it with massive force. But occasionally, during that process, the alignment is slightly off. When the design is impressed more than once and not perfectly aligned, something strange happens. The letters begin to double, not slightly, not subtly, but dramatically. On certain 1972 Lincoln cents, the doubling is so bold that the words almost appear to vibrate off the coin. Look closely at "In God we trust," look at "Liberty," look at the date itself, 1972. Instead of a single clean impression, you'll see a clear, unmistakable doubling of the letters and numbers. Almost like the design has a shadow. This is the legendary 1972 double die obverse, and here's where things get interesting. Most people never look at their pennies closely. A double design can pass through countless hands without anyone noticing, but collectors notice, and when they do, the value of that little copper coin explodes. A normal 1972 penny might buy you, well, nothing. It's worth 1 cent, but a genuine 1972 double die penny, depending on its condition, it can sell for hundreds, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, and in the world of elite coin collecting, condition changes everything. Coins are graded on a strict scale. The closer a coin is to the way it looked the moment it left the mint, the more valuable it becomes. A heavily circulated example might sell for a few $100s. A sharp, well-preserved coin might bring several thousand. But a pristine example, one that somehow escaped decades of wear, that's where collectors start competing, and competition in the rare coin market can get intense. Stories circulate through collectors' circles of extraordinary offers for near-perfect examples. Private deals. Auction whispers. Coins that push the boundaries of what people think a penny could ever be worth. Some reports in the market have even suggested valuations approaching $844,000 for exceptional, top-tier examples tied to elite collections and extraordinary grading outcomes. Just imagine that for a moment. $844,000 for a penny. Let that sink in. A coin most people would toss into a gas station tray could, under the right circumstances, become a life-changing discovery. But here's the twist most people never hear about: not every doubled 1972 penny is the famous one. In fact, there are several different varieties. Some show minor machine doubling, which collectors consider far less valuable. Others have subtle distortions that look promising but don't command big prices. The real prize is the strong Class 1 doubled die, often called variety #1. And once you know what to look for, it jumps out immediately. The doubling on Liberty is bold and clear. The words "In God we trust" appear dramatically doubled. The date shows distinct separation in the numbers. It's not a trick of the light. It's not damage. It's a genuine mint error frozen into copper, and thousands of them were released into circulation before anyone realized what had happened. Think about that, thousands of valuable error coins scattered across the country, mixed into everyday pocket change. Many were spent at grocery stores, dropped into parking meters, lost in couch cushions. Or tossed into jars that have sat untouched for decades. Which leads to an obvious question: how many are still out there? Nobody really knows. Some have been discovered in coin rolls from banks. Others have surfaced in inherited collections, old coffee cans, and forgotten piggy banks. Every so often, a new one appears, unexpected, unrecognized for years, suddenly transforming from pocket change into a collector's prize, and every time that happens, it sends a ripple through the coin collecting world, because it proves something exciting: the hunt isn't over, not even close right now. Millions of Americans have jars of old coins tucked away somewhere in their homes. Drawers full of loose change. Coffee cans filled with pennies saved over decades. Most people assume they're worthless, but history keeps proving otherwise. The most valuable coins are often discovered by ordinary people who simply took a closer look. Someone checking a handful of pennies, someone curious about an unusual date, someone who paused for just a moment and asked a simple question: what if this one is different? That question has turned pocket change into college funds, into retirement savings, into stories that collectors talk about for years, and the 1972 no-mint mark Lincoln cent remains one of the most famous examples of how a tiny detail can unlock enormous value. So the next time you see a 1972 penny, don't ignore it, turn it over, look at the front, check the words "I in God we trust," study liberty, examine the date. Do the letters look doubled? Do the numbers seem to have a shadow? If they do, you might be holding one of the most sought-after Lincoln cent errors ever discovered, and that tiny copper coin, worth 1 cent to almost everyone else, could suddenly become something far more powerful. A proof that treasure still hides in plain sight, proof that history sometimes slips quietly into our pockets, and proof that the next life-changing discovery in the world of rare coins might not come from a museum, or a vault, or an elite auction. It might come from a penny sitting in your change jar right now, waiting for someone curious enough to look. Most people walk past pennies without a second thought. They sit forgotten in jars, buried in couch cushions, rattling around in glove compartments. Worth 1 cent, practically nothing. But what if one of those ordinary-looking pennies could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? What if the next time you dump a handful of change onto the table, a tiny copper coin stares back at you with the power to change your life? Because hidden among the billions of Lincoln cents struck in 1964, there may be a coin so rare, so mysterious, that collectors whisper about it like buried treasure. The 1964 Lincoln cent with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faces right. "In God we trust" arches across the top. Liberty sits quietly beside his shoulder. And the date, 1964, rests beneath the portrait, and something else is missing. There's no mint mark. Now here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In 1964, the Philadelphia Mint didn't use a mint mark. So technically, millions of Lincoln cents from that year were struck exactly like this. No mint mark. Just the date, which raises a simple question: if so many exist, why are collectors hunting them like hidden gold? The answer lies in the tiny details most people never notice, because sometimes a coin that looks ordinary is hiding something extraordinary, and in the world of coin collecting, those hidden secrets can turn a 1 cent coin into a staggering payday. To understand why, we have to go back to 1964. America was in the middle of a coin shortage. Vending machines were swallowing change faster than the US Mint could produce it. People were hoarding silver coins, and the mint was under enormous pressure to crank out more currency. So the presses ran harder than ever, billions of coins were struck, and when machines run that fast, mistakes happen, tiny mistakes, nearly invisible mistakes, but sometimes, those mistakes are exactly what collectors dream about. Imagine looking closely at a 1964 penny and noticing something strange in the lettering. The word Liberty appears slightly doubled, the date looks thicker, almost as if it was stamped twice. That's called a doubled die error, and in the rare coin world, doubled dies are legendary, because they aren't just random damage. They're mistakes created during the manufacturing of the die itself, the metal stamp that produces every coin. Once a doubled die enters production, it can create a small number of coins with that distinctive doubling, and those coins can become incredibly valuable. But that's only one of the secrets hiding inside some 1964 cents. Another possibility appears along the edges. Picture a penny where Lincoln's portrait seems slightly off-center. The rim looks uneven. Part of the design is missing near the edge. That's an off-center strike. Most off-center coins are caught before leaving the mint. But a few slip through, and when they do, collectors take notice, because each one is unique. Then there are die cracks. These are tiny fractures that form in the die after striking thousands or even hundreds of thousands of coins. When that cracked die hits another blank planchet, the crack transfers onto the coin as a raised line. At first, it might look like a small scar across the surface, but in certain cases, those cracks grow into dramatic features called cuds, where chunks of the die break away completely, and suddenly, a simple penny becomes a rare collectible. Still not convinced a penny could be worth serious money? Consider this: coin collectors aren't just searching for errors, they're searching for condition, and condition changes everything. A coin that circulated for decades might only be worth a few cents. Scratched, worn, and faded, but the exact same coin, if preserved in pristine, untouched condition, can skyrocket in value. Collectors call this mint state. It means the coin looks almost exactly as it did the moment it left the press. Nowhere. No dullness. No damage, just crisp details and blazing original luster. And when a common coin survives in extraordinary condition, it becomes rare, extremely rare. Think about it: most pennies from 1964 were spent immediately. Passed from hand to hand. Dropped into parking meters. Tossed into cash registers. Almost none were protected, which means finding one in near perfect condition today is like discovering a time capsule. And when grading companies assign those top-tier grades, MS67, MS68, or higher, the value can explode. Some reported sales and private market estimates for exceptional Lincoln cents from this era have climbed into astonishing territory, with rumors and collector chatter pointing to valuations approaching hundreds of thousands of dollars for the finest. Known examples: numbers like $844,000 have circulated in discussions of elite condition rarities and unique varieties, fueling the modern treasure hunt happening right now in kitchens, garages, and coin shops across America. Whether every claim proves true or not, one thing is certain: collectors are paying serious money for the right coins. And that brings us to the real twist in this story. Because unlike rare gold coins locked in museum vaults, these pennies were everyday money. They were mixed into circulation with billions of others, which means some could still be hiding right now. In old jars of change, in inherited coin collections, in dusty boxes that haven't been opened in decades, or even in the loose coins sitting in your house tonight. Think about that for a moment. How many pennies have passed through your hands over the years? Hundreds, thousands. What if one of them was special and you never knew? This is exactly why collectors keep searching, because history has shown, again and again, that incredible discoveries happen in the most ordinary places. A rare coin in a pocket full of change. A valuable error hidden in a bankroll. A forgotten penny sitting quietly in a family coin jar. And every year, stories surface of collectors and everyday people finding coins worth far more than anyone expected. So how do you check? Start simple: look at the date. Next, check for the missing mint mark beneath the date area. Remember, Philadelphia coins from that year normally have none, but you're looking for exceptional details. Then examine the coin closely. Do the letters look doubled? Does Lincoln's profile seem unusually sharp? Are there strange lines, cracks, or off-center designs? Does the coin look unusually bright, almost untouched by time? If something feels different, don't ignore it. Because the difference between an ordinary penny and a collector's price can be incredibly small. Sometimes it's just a tiny detail most people would never notice. But to the trained eye, the detail can mean everything. And here's the final thought that keeps collectors searching: some of the most valuable coins ever discovered were hiding in plain sight for decades. Nobody noticed them until someone finally did. So the next time you see a penny, pause before you toss it aside, take a closer look, turn it under the light, study the date. Because somewhere out there, mixed among billions of ordinary coins, a few extraordinary ones are still waiting to be found, and the next life-changing discovery might already be sitting in your pocket. Sparkles.